All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Baseline Bums podcast. It's your host, Rob, aka B-Ball Archives, and once again, I am joined with a very special guest, Knicks fan Daniel Lubofsky. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. I know it's probably not a really great morning because I did watch the Knicks game last night, but let's just dive on in. How are you feeling about Knicks basketball right now?
Uh, Not great. For like the first time in a bit of time, not great at all. Because, they win the first two games of the series, everyone's feeling good. They lose game three, but okay, it was really close. And this blowout was unlike anything we've ever seen from this Knicks team. And credit to the guys because afterwards they acknowledged it fully. Isaiah Hartenstein straight up said, like, the fans deserve better than that. They all were saying we need to be better. But at the same time, you're just seeing like now OG Anunoby's out, and who knows when he's going to come back. You saw yesterday Jalen Brunson's foot, like he just doesn't have the same lift and explosiveness. And like I've admired and I've loved this team so much for the way they fight through everything and just figure out how to win games. But it's really, I hope I'm wrong, but it's looking like it's sort of reaching the end of what they're able to do because they're just getting burnt out. It seems like.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they've been almost relying on a small group of guys to get it done. And I mean, it's never a promising situation whenever your number two guy goes down and your team looks better. Like that's always a strange
We can have
thing.
that discussion right now. We're gonna
Well,
have that discussion.
no, not necessarily, but at the same time, I think you brought up a really good point. Like the team doesn't look the same with Anunoby out, the defense and just like the weight that Jalen Brunson has to bear night in night out just seems like it's almost just unfair how much he has to do. And yeah, it looks like the wheels may fall off, but I'm not ready to say that just yet because I also think the Pacers had a hell of a night last night. Like let's not take credit away from one of the best playoff shooting performances that I've seen in a while.
Yeah, you are right about that. They did shoot the lights out. And also, even if you go back to game three, if the Knicks can grab a couple rebounds, hit a few more free throws, like Andrew Nemhard doesn't hit a 30-footer after struggling all game, maybe the Knicks are up 3-0 and now they're up 3-1. But it's just, OG Anunoby to me, I think is just he's so valuable because there just aren't many guys like him. There aren't many big wings who can guard multiple positions, shoot three, take a little bit off the dribble. And so to be missing that guy, you see how small the Knicks are now, where Josh Hart's having to guard Pascal Siakam. And so like that's not a recipe for success. And you also just figure that like the more games they play, the more worn down they're going to be. So it's not like there's any room for rest. I will say though that in between games five and six, I think there's like a few days of rest. It's been a very weird schedule for Knicks Pacers because like I think they got an extra day off before the series started, but ever since then they've been playing every other day, even with the travel, which is not what most series is like. And so maybe that rest in between games five and six will help. Having home court advantage still helps. That's why you go out and you get the number two seed. But it's just losing OG, like one of the most unique players in the NBA. Like that's I feel like a real gut punch to this team.
Absolutely. AJ, how are you feeling about the Knicks Pacers game last night?
I'm glad it's over.
Oh, you and me both.
It was definitely a rough one. I was driving back from San Antonio back home for Mother's Day, and I was following around on my phone. I looked down, and it was 73-43, and I went, "Oh, that's that's not good." But I mean, kind of what you guys were touching on earlier is just they look like they just ran out of gas. I mean, Josh Hart can't play the entire game for two rounds and still have any energy to last the entire game in a tough series like this one. So it's rough to watch. It breaks my heart because the Knicks were looking so good. The city was hype. Everything was kind of falling into place. You beat the dreaded Sixers with Joel Embiid, and that was awesome. And then, Mitchell Robinson gets hurt, OG gets hurt, and kind of the life, I wouldn't say life got sucked out because you still won those two games early, but you can tell that there was a dip, and it really hurts when you're not at home for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, magical things happen in the Garden, so I'm not willing to count them out.
That's very true. I just think it's yeah, it's so it's so difficult, and I know we always say basketball is a team sport, and you need to rely on your role players. But whenever it's Josh Hart having an off game or DiVincenzo having an off shooting night, and it's things like that that can really derail you, you just don't have enough superstar power. It's just I feel as if there needs to be that additional piece outside of even Anunoby to make it through a tough playoff run. Even though I think this is something that Knicks fans can get excited about, though. I mean, I feel like there's enough there to build a foundation. Finally, there's somebody that you can build your franchise around. Is that what you're feeling about Jalen Brunson? Is that the feeling in New York?
Like I'm always sort of skeptical to call players superstars, and because I feel like that's the highest honor. To me, that's you're capable of being the best player on a championship team. And I feel like you have to sort of do it to earn that title. Like you can't really have that title prematurely, but just everything Jalen Brunson is showing us leads me to believe that he's definitely on the right track. And it's funny, you mentioned, needing that secondary guy to help Brunson. Like the Knicks have that. The Knicks, in theory, have that in Julius Randle. Like that's what's so frustrating, and it's so funny to
Yeah.
hear people talk about the Knicks and what they're missing and what they need because it's like Randle's been gone for so long. Like he's been out since I think it was the end of January, that game against the Heat when he got hurt. That like you almost sort of forget that the Knicks have this 24-9-5 All-Star, All-NBA bully forward who's just there. And so that definitely helps answer those questions of like, helping Brunson, but he's just been gone for so long that we're just used to it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Like in theory, his production, his skill set, and how he contributes does help, but I also think his mindset doesn't help, and sort of the way he carries himself and I guess exists as a teammate because I see him quit more than a lot of other players at his caliber of play. And I see him noticeably quit on offense or get upset when he feels like he should have taken a shot. And if you're seeing somebody blossom like Jalen Brunson, maybe that's enough to kind of snap Julius Randle and be like, hey, you're not the number one option. Jalen is, you need to fall in line. But at the same time, I almost feel like capitalizing on Julius Randle's value right now, bringing in somebody that knows that Jalen is the guy and to supplement that style of play, I think that's paramount. But who wants to bring on Julius Randle with what he's being paid right now?
I mean, okay, so I guess I have three responses to that. One, Julius isn't making that much money relative to other stars in the league. I think he signed a 4-year, $117 million extension after his first All-Star campaign, which comes out to what, 25, 26 a year, which is a lot, but compared to like All-Star, All-NBA guys, not really a lot.
Devin
Secondly,
Vassell's getting paid more than that.
Yeah,
bingo.
that's
There we
that's,
go.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Um, Secondly, I don't know if Randall has a problem with Brunson as the leading man. I've never heard anything to, contradict that. Like, I don't fully know, but that's not the vibe I've been getting as someone who watches a lot of Knicks games. The one thing I will say though is I do agree that he does have a propensity at times to sort of just like shut off, like just not really give the effort. That was a big frustration for a lot of Knicks fans last year against Miami, where like it wasn't even like you were missing shots. He just like you have like these Twitter threads full of clips of him just like blatantly not rotating or not trying on defense. And that was such a big frustration for Knicks fans. And so that's going to be very big next year, assuming he comes back fully healthy, of like, just making sure he fits in, understands the vibes of this team. I think he has no problem giving it up to Jalen Brunson, especially after what Brunson has done. But he's also got to figure out like that kind of stuff can't happen. And I wonder if Tibbs is finally going to hold him accountable, because that was also a big frustration with the Knicks fans. Is like Tibbs sort of let him do whatever he wanted because he didn't have any better options. Well, now you have Josh Onoji and Nobi you could pair at the 3-4. So maybe that'll help Randall, really sort of hold himself accountable when it comes to giving the full effort all the time. But in terms of also like you want to talk trading him, like it sounds good in theory, like, yeah, trade Randall for other stuff. What are you getting in a Randall trade that's better than 24-9-5? In 70 plus games. That's a big thing. Most stars nowadays don't play 70 plus games. Julius Randle does. And so like what do you like trading him sounds good in theory if you can get back Giannis, but like That's not going to happen. You trade Julius for a bunch of young guys and some picks, and for all his flaws, I'll still take everything he brings to the table.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Honestly, I was mainly speaking about it from just like a moving pieces around standpoint, and I've never thought about it from the practicality of like a Knicks fan. So that coming from that standpoint, it makes sense. Like you don't want to give up on this guy you know that can give you this baseline level of production because that's just not those kind of guys aren't floating around everywhere in the NBA.
Exactly. Exactly. They're really not. And like I think Knicks fans and I think NBA fans kind of take that for granted, especially the durability aspect where it's this tough balance of understanding he's had playoff struggles. He's had a lot of playoff struggles, but like he's also a big reason why the Knicks get to the playoffs to begin
Mhm.
with. So like it's just about balancing those expectations. But uh next year I'm hoping is sort of a resurgent year for him because I think this playoffs has had a lot of people realize like, oh wait, we really need this dude. We really
Right.
need everything he brings. Brunson needs that co-star. We need that size up front. So we'll see what happens next year with that.
I
But
really
it's
think you guys are just missing Mitchell Robinson. Like that dude he's the heartbeat of the team. Let's be honest. Whenever you watch him, he's the guy that's doing all the hard work. He's grabbing the rebounds. He's setting the hard picks. He's taking charges and stuff. I mean, my introduction to Mitchell Robinson for me was when Wimby went to Madison Square Garden and just getting pushed around. I'm like, who is this guy and where can we get him? Because I think in this series with the Pacers, if you had Mitchell Robinson, this is a completely different series. I think you win game three, maybe drop game four. I don't know. The shooting lights out is hard to overcome, but I think you win game three, and I think this is a different series with someone. Because right now you guys are running a center and four guards.
it's yeah. I mean, it's funny. It feels like so long ago, but like Mitchell Robinson, like the first chunk of the season was just absolutely dominating. There was talks about
Mm-hmm.
him as like as a defensive player of the year candidate. He was just dominating the offensive boards. I think he was leading the league by miles and miles. And then he comes back and he's like a little iffy in the playoffs. But I agree. I think one of the Knicks' big advantages is the rebounding, is the size up front. It's 48 minutes of either Hartenstein or Mitchell Robinson, and that can wear teams down. I think that could especially wear a team like Indiana down, who I
Mm-hmm.
like Miles Turner. I don't think he's like the physically imposing kind of big man. And you saw it work well in the first two games, but then you lose that. Now all of a sudden it's Hardenstein, but then it's also Precious, who just plays differently, and it's a lot smaller, and it literally just takes away one of the Knicks' biggest advantages, which is
For
rebounds,
sure.
specifically on the offensive glass.
And you need someone to talk a little shit too while you're doing it, and
Oh
that's where
yeah.
he comes in.
Oh yeah. He's gonna come in there, get in your face, and like not gonna be afraid of the physicality. And every team needs those guys. And Hardenstein's like that too. Hardenstein, he's banging down low. He reminds me of like an old school, like mid 2000s Spurs player that is in there setting hard screens. Like he's one of those guys you want. But at the same time, it's like you mentioned the 48 minutes, and that's such a Thibodeau thing where it's like I'm gonna play my guys as much as humanly possible, and it may potentially may potentially wear them down, and I think we're starting to see some of the players kind of break down. Are you kind of potentially frustrated with that style from Thibodeau and how he's continuing to do that, and maybe hadn't learned from D Rose?
I was a little bit more frustrated with it during the regular season because I think when it comes to the regular season, you do need to sort of have a bit of the long game in mind of like, hey, if we're playing for the playoffs, which the Knicks were, and I think the Knicks were, firmly in the playoff conversation, you sort of have to like, you know, just play that long game. And it was also frustrating because I think an article came out where Tibbs talked about how, he's sort of scarred because I think he was in the arena. He was on I think it was Houston's coaching staff during the T-Mac 13 points in 35 seconds. So to him, no lead is ever safe. So it's like those few minutes also bother me when like the starters are in where they're up 20 and whatnot. Oh, right, my bad. I was talking.
Yeah, cool moment, T Mac.
Yeah, sorry about
Why
that.
did that? Why did it have to be against San Antonio?
Oh,
That's such a scarring moment.
We'll get back to that in a second, Daniel. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
you
yeah.
guys have had such a tough, scarring life as Spurs fans. Uh, um, woe is you guys. But when it comes to the playoffs, I think I'm fine with it. Like playoffs, you gotta win and you gotta play like there's no tomorrow. You can't like conserve energy in the playoffs. So I don't really have such a problem with it. You also gotta consider that the Knicks just don't have many options right now. So like even more so, you gotta play your guys more minutes. Like this is what you play for. This like the playoffs, if you're not gonna play your best guys more minutes, every team does that. Every team typically plays their guys more minutes in the playoffs. Now, to the extent that Tibbs does, where Josh Hart's playing 48 minutes a game, okay, maybe not, but like again, you gotta treat every game like there's no tomorrow. And the thing I will also say in Tibbs' defense is a lot of people point to all the injuries that the Knicks have had as a sign of like Thibodeau's minutes thing isn't good for them. But like a lot of the injuries the guys have, had like they haven't necessarily been fatigue related injuries. Like Julius just fell on a guy. Mitch, I think, hurt his ankle on a play, and it was like maybe the Embiid pull thing re-aggravated it. Bogdanovich, it was his wrist, and then I think he fell and hurt, what was it, his leg or something? Like so OG, you want to talk about OG Anunoby, like his hamstring may be okay, but like it's not like OG was like this pillar of durability in Toronto either. So it's not to say that Tibbs is fully absolved of, I don't even want to call it blame, but like you could point to that and you say, yeah, hey, maybe Tibbs's minutes thing, it does re-aggravate some stuff. But at the same time, I don't know if that's as big of a case as people make it out to be. And also there's this aspect of like, okay, but it's the playoffs. Like this is what you got to do, especially with the team that's as thin as the Knicks are right now.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think there should be an increase in minutes whenever you're playing your stars in the playoffs. And I think that's where I'm kind of on your side where it's like once you get to that point in the season, your post All-Star break, your joints are hurting, everything is like that's when you should be starting to, all right, we're gonna ramp up your minutes now. And I guess that I am more critical of him during the regular season because it's like, guys, guys aren't really playing 75 plus games anymore. Their bodies are trying to stick around to have 18, 20-year careers. And whenever you have that kind of mindset, you got to kind of adapt your coaching with it. So like, I think I agree with that philosophy. Um,
Well,
but at,
can I just say one more thing? What was also unique, sorry to interrupt you. What was also a unique perspective is someone put out an article, I forget exactly who it was, talking about how there's sort of a benefit to playing guys a bunch of minutes in the regular season, or at least towards the end of the regular season, because then it gets them ramped up, to play those heavy minutes in the playoffs. Think about if you're running a marathon, you're not just going to immediately go run 26 miles. You're going to ease into it. You're going to, up the pace, whatever. And so like there is something to be said about, in the first round, like the Knicks are so well conditioned to be playing 40 plus minutes a game because they were doing it in the regular season. And there's something to that.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, your body's going to adapt to that muscle memory and then act accordingly. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's just when it gets to that point of wear and tear and I don't want to put all that on Thibodeau because there's just been certain injuries in his past where people will point to, but yeah, I like that perspective. As Spurs fans, we know about playing your stars more in the postseason. That's what you got to do to be successful. But that being
I, I
said,
I got a question for Daniel real quick.
yeah, yeah.
Daniel, how did the Knicks win this series?
How did the Knicks win this series? That's a good question. Well, having home court helps. Like, Indiana's got to win at the Garden. That's going to be tough. If no other reason, then the fans are going to be absolutely insane for game 5 and a potential game 7. Game 7 at the Garden, my goodness, I would do anything to get there. And so you imagine that. I think we sort of saw the refs lean more towards Indiana in games 3 and 4. And maybe it was because Rick Carlisle's complaints work. Maybe it's just because naturally, like, you're going to favor the home team in the same way. The Knicks got to think of a few more favorable calls in games 1 and 2. So that'll definitely help. But other than that, I, it's tough. I want to be optimistic, but it's very tough when our best player is hobbled. Like that's the thing. Like we've ridden Jalen Brunson all postseason long on the back of just historic numbers. But if he's not capable of doing that, then like I don't fully know. And it's the same thing with OG, where he's just this insanely unique, versatile piece who can guard Pascal Siakam as well as anyone. But if he's not there, then like I don't fully know. But what I will say is what the Knicks have done this postseason is make me believe that they will always find a way, or they are always capable of finding a way. And it's not in any way that I could tell you like, oh, they're going to control the glass. It's going to be a random like Alec Burks goes for 20. Dante DiVincenzo in game 3. What did he hit? 7 threes? Maybe Prestos Achua has a big game. It's this team always fights. They always figure out how to stay in games, how to make them close. You look at that Philly series, like all 4 of their wins were just like by the seat of their pants or whatever the phrase is. So they're gonna find a way, and being backed by the Garden crowd will certainly help.
Right on. We love Dante DiVincenzo on this podcast.
Well,
Absolutely love Dante DiVincenzo.
Oh
He is
yeah.
so much fun to watch.
Yeah,
yes,
we've said it multiple times. He would be a great Spurs player.
We tried
he
to get him,
would.
and then
He
y'all
would
got
be a
him.
great Spurs player. That's a good call.
We
Oh, yeah.
tried. We really tried to get him, and he was like, "I'm going to New York." And we're like, "Have fun with the taxes."
Oh my. Having fun with the taxes, having fun with the winning though. So you take what you can get.
Yeah,
We could have won more
absolutely.
if he was on our team.
That honestly, that's a good take. It's just you gotta take the positives where you can, and even if it's a season where people are, players are kind of falling apart towards the end, I still feel like even if you guys were to be eliminated by the Pacers, I'm not saying you are, I still would feel like that is a good foundation building season. It's not where you want to be, obviously, but it's a season where you can be like, hey, there were some successes, some things we figured out. We have a lily pad we can jump off of, and it's clear who we're gonna jump off with. And I think there's something to be said about that. Because as a Spurs fan, I feel like I'm saying the same thing about us. It's like all of the bottom feeders at the end, at the bottom of the NBA, I feel like we have some of the best foundation humanly possible, and I feel very similarly about y'all.
You have the best foundation in Wemby. Because that dude is just wow. I think it's tough. Like I'm a bit conflicted because, naturally in everything in life, you always want to be progressing more. And so to have back-to-back second round losses would feel a little bit annoying. And yeah, you could obviously chalk this season up to injuries. I think the thing that's really frustrating for me is that, yeah, you could say, hey, let's run it back next year. We're going to be so good next year. We're going to be contenders next year. Because if you look at the Knicks when they were fully healthy, they were 14-2 in January, blowing teams out, blew out Miami, Denver, Philly. Like that was there. That was the recipe. That like the OG Randall Brunson trio, like it was there. I think so. So you definitely have that optimism heading into next season, regardless of how this season ends. I think the frustrating thing for me though is just knowing that like you just never really know in the NBA. Like your window is never open for as long as you think it'll be. So you always want to seize every opportunity that you can have. Like we've all probably heard so many NBA players talk about how, I know JJ Redick is a big one. He talked about how he was part of the Magic team that got to the finals in 09. They lose. He's like, oh, I'm definitely going to be back here. Never made it back to the finals. And so there is this sort of frustration aspect of knowing that this team fully healthy could have really done something special. And I think really legitimately competed for an NBA championship. And so I hope they'll still be in that position next year, but I just don't know, like naturally, I just don't know what their health is going to look like next year. I don't even know if the full team is going to be back next year because Hartenstein's a free agent. You assume they're going to re-sign OG, but like Hartenstein, I don't know. He still hasn't gotten that massive contract yet in the NBA. So like you just don't know what's going to happen. I think he wants to re-sign, but again, you just don't know what the number is going to be. You don't know what the rest of the league is going to look like next year. So it's definitely been a great season. It's been a successful season, no matter how it ends, even if it ends in the second round. But I know a lot of Knicks fans, myself included, feel frustration in knowing that, there's a lot left on the table and just, ultimately really not knowing if we're going to have a chance to capitalize on it next year, because that's just how life works sometimes.
Yeah, it's like catching lightning in a bottle, and even if you have that lightning, sometimes it can just blow up in your hand. Um,
Literally.
yeah, that's a really great way to put it. Even if you have all those pieces, it's still a little unsure. So what would be a move the Knicks could make via the draft, maybe via a trade somehow that would give you some more reassurance moving into next season?
I don't really. I mean, so the obvious one is like go out and get a superstar, go out and trade for Giannis, maybe even Devin Booker. But like, we're talking like realistic moves based on what we know now. I don't really know if there is a move. Like you want to bring it. So you just mentioned the draft. Like, is there a rookie we can bring in who's going to impact? Like, probably not. I really think the answer is just to run it back and just get everyone back, re-sign OG, re-sign Hartenstein, and just run it back because we saw this team at full strength was really, really good. And they're, the problems we talk about now is they don't have depth. Like at full strength, we are a deep team, star power, shooting, defense, versatility,
Hmm.
rebounding. Like, so as much as you want to try and like maybe fine tune some things, I don't know what move could possibly be out there to make to make any sort of difference. I think the best move, and it feels weird because you always want to be making changes to feel like you're moving forward. But I think the best bet for the Knicks is to just re-sign everyone and run it back and fingers crossed for full health.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, you brought up the 14-2 whenever, Jalen Brunson and Randall and Anunoby and everyone were healthy playing together. So it makes sense to see if you could have an elongated version of that success and what that may look like. I guess just in the back of my head, I'm thinking even if there's full health, I still don't know if I'm betting on that team beating a Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, or like I don't even know if that team is getting past that ultimate hump. So I guess it's just maybe they don't need to make a move and they need to wait and see what they need to do. But I guess that's just where my head was at.
For sure. And that totally makes sense if you want to pick Boston. I guess not really pushback, but just my rebuttal would just be like, then what move do you think the Knicks should make? Like what move is out there for them to make? Because I don't necessarily want to make any big moves because I feel like the dynamic of this team is so great. You have the Nova boys. I think Brunson and Randall have developed chemistry. Hartenstein and Mitch really love each other and they've become like such good friends, and that's great. And I just think the vibes of this team are so good. So even if you want to say this team might not be favored against Boston, I still think they'd probably give them as good a shot as any other team in the East. And sometimes it's not about saying, hey, we're going to be favored, but like sometimes you just got to roll with what you have. And I think this is the best version of what the Knicks have. And that's good enough for me in a fight against Boston.
Oh, absolutely. I think that makes all the sense in the world because, we're looking back on some of our Spurs championship years. We weren't favored. We just had a solid team. We rolled it out there. We got some favorable matchups. We played good basketball and we ended up winning a championship. And it's like, and I feel like you guys aren't far away from that. And if there's some health, who's to say that couldn't happen? So I like the optimism. I feel like you're one of the more optimistic Knick fans I've talked to recently.
I try to be. I feel like because I've been a fan for over a decade now, and so I remember a lot of the dark years. I've actually blacked out a lot of those dark years, and so like I keep forgetting Derek Fisher was the coach of the Knicks at one point. But
Oh
yeah, I
yeah.
right? No one remember.
Oh
Oof.
man. Yeah, honestly, Derek Fisher, we have disdain for Derek Fisher as
Oh,
well.
true, true. So do
We
I. Don't
we
worry.
we curse point four around here.
Oh, so true. So we're both on the same page. But yeah, you got to be optimistic. If nothing else, I think it's you got to appreciate what we're doing right now because as we know, like you just don't like we're not all Spurs, okay? It can't all be like a few years of like making the eighth seed, whatever, and then getting another generational big man. Some of us have to struggle. And so yeah, you always try and have the perspective of just like appreciating how good things are right now, while also understanding, okay, how do we keep growing this? How do we keep building? How do we keep setting expectations to reach even higher? So it is admittedly a tough balance, but I think there's just so much to be optimistic about with the Knicks, with everything that they've built. And I really do think health, assuming everyone re-signs this summer, health is really the only thing standing in our way of a legitimate run, whether that's to the Eastern Conference Finals or even the finals past Boston.
No, that makes sense. I like it. I like it. I do have a question. So you've been a Knicks fan, you're saying for over a decade. Um, I'm assuming you know all about Knicks history and stuff. Who who would you say who would you say is your favorite Knick of all time and why?
Ooh, okay, that's a good question. I mean, I hold different spots in my heart for different Knicks because Amari was like the guy when I first like his first season in New
Wine
York was
bath.
like, what?
Wine bath.
Why, literally, oh God, that's just a lock part of it. If it works, I don't know if it worked, but he holds a special place in my heart because he was like the guy when I first became a fan. And I don't know if anyone really remembers, but like pre-Melo Amari on the Knicks was like a borderline MVP candidate. Started in the All-Star game. He was the one leading the Knicks to a top 6 seed, and it was this really awesome journey. He had 9 straight games of 30 points. That was a franchise record. And it was really special because people didn't know if he could be the guy without a Steve Nash. And so to see what he was doing, and obviously the Knicks were coming off a bunch of, just bad seasons. So to have this guy, this sort of underrated guy in a sense, come in and lead this franchise to, relevance back to playoff, positioning, that was really special. I think my perspective on Melo has certainly softened since he was a Knick. I know I was definitely excited when he became a Knick, but there was also obviously all that talk about should they have done the trade? They gave up too much, whatever. And there was also frustration in terms of him as a player. Obviously, like, is he a ball hog? Does he play defense? All that stuff. Can he lead the team? But, in the years since he left, I've definitely grown a greater appreciation for if nothing else, Carmelo Anthony took on the challenge of wanting to win in New York, which I don't think is something I appreciated at the time, but I think I appreciate it more and more the more you see more stars duck the challenge of playing in New York. And so as frustrated as I am with some of the things he may or may not have done, and you also sort of want to give him the benefit of the doubt in terms of like, he didn't really have such a good team around him, like ever. Like who was his second best player? It was like half a year of Amari, Tyson Chandler, like, come on, like that wasn't really much, but like you appreciate the guy for wanting to take on the challenge of bringing the Knicks back to winning ways, and that's a level of respect that's certainly grown with me since he departed. And now obviously what Jalen Brunson is doing is just it's kind of hard to put into words because like I definitely liked signing him. I wasn't in love with the idea of giving 100 million to, I think he was like the first non-all-star to sign $100 million contract with a new team. They had to move around a lot of pieces to free up that cap space. I feel like that's a move you do when you're trying to sign like an A1 superstar and not a solid point guard out of Dallas. And just like what he's done ever since is just uh, it's hard to put into words because it's just been so remarkable to see what he's doing and to see the way he's like, he is a Knick. Those guys who like really are just synonymous with the city. You could tell
Yep.
that like personality and city really fit. Tim Duncan was like that, like just super quiet and reserved. And so like it's just so special. And you also hear him talk, post game, and he just always says the right things. He's such a great leader. And like even Julius Randle, like what he's done to sort of lay the foundation before Brunson got there was also really special. So I don't know if I have just one Knick I can name. I think it's just like each guy holds a different place in my heart and means something different to me.
That makes sense, and that's a really great answer because it's like you can't. I feel like it's really hard to label one player as your favorite because there's just so many different things I love about, each individual player. And you're right, it's almost like an era based thing, or it's like
Right, exactly.
it's a characteristic based thing because like I love, if I'm bringing up my Spurs, it's like I'm thinking about Manu for his competitiveness. I'm thinking about, Tim Duncan for his leadership. I'm thinking, like if I was wanting to be to pick the best man I knew, I would probably pick someone like David Robinson. And so like I literally feel that same exact almost struggle in terms of like, who do you love the most? But I think it's always nice to sort of relive the past of your franchise and think about what made you appreciate the game to begin with, because we all had that foundation.
100%. That's a great way to put it.
Absolutely. Well, Daniel, thank you for taking time out of your day to hop on the podcast and chat with us a little bit. I feel like I got a lot of Knicks insight, because I mean, Spurs fans, we watch some Knicks games, but nowhere near as much as you are. You're tuning in every single week. So, thank you for sharing some of that with us and opening our minds a little bit.
It was my absolute pleasure at any time. Thank you guys so much for having me. Always fun to talk basketball, and I will take any amount of time out of my day to talk about the Knicks.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, I got
even on a day like today.
one more question before you go.
Yeah.
Was the lottery rigged? Was the Knicks pick actually in a freezer, and was it cold for David Stern to pull out?
If it was, then I'm just annoyed they didn't do it again. Because what was that, 40 years ago? And like couldn't have gotten a Zion. Like that's where the whole idea of like NBA favors the Knicks, whatever. Like that's been the discussion of the last couple of days. Like NBA wants the Knicks to win, and it's like, do they? Because they've never moved up in the lottery ever, like ever. So like, you tell me. People will hear what they want to hear. They have agendas and they're going to stick to them.
Oh yeah, people will make up endless stories, especially if it's about the Knicks or the Lakers, any big market team. There's going to be some kind of story.
I'm down with the hatred. I'll take all the hatred. After years of like irrelevance and mockery, hate on the Knicks all you want. I love it.
As Cat Williams says, feel free to hate on me. But guys, thank y'all so much for joining me today. That's been another episode of the Baseline Bums podcast. AJ, Daniel, y'all are absolute angels. Thank y'all for being here. And yeah, we'll do it again soon.
Looking forward to it.
All righty. And AJ, as we always say, it's
Go Spurs, go.
Yeah.
Sure.
I see y'all.
All right, peace.